Part 52. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 511. Song Ying knew what happened in the Tang family in the past. It was a fact that Ning Yuhi's mother was beaten to death. It was also known that Su Buling was Ning Yuhi's sworn brother. Now Su Buling suddenly came to kill Tang Jiao under the pretext of blood revenge. If this really happened in front of the emperor, he would probably only scold Su Buling for being reckless, and Tang Jiao's death was in vain. Song Ying couldn't deal with Zulu alone. If two people surrounded Su Buling and killed Tang Jiao, how could he fight? Tang Jiao also saw the current situation and guessed that Song Ying might not care about him, so he quickly said, "Song Lord, Jia Gong Gong, my Tang family is loyal to the court, and all the children in the family serve in the army. What happened back then was done by my second uncle Tang Zun. Even if I am at fault, I am not guilty of death. You have to make the decision for me." Song Ying gritted his teeth and looked at Zulu, who was finally surrounded, and said coldly, "Su Shizi, the investigation department is handling an important case. You have a grudge with the Tang family. You can investigate it thoroughly afterwards. If you continue to make trouble—" Su Buling's eyes were slightly cold. "If you speak so presumptuously again, I will deal with you justified. I will not interfere with your investigation, and you should not stop me from taking revenge. We don't interfere with each other. If you insist on obstructing my revenge and messing up the case, it is your own fault. It has nothing to do with me." The situation was deadlocked, and the four people looked at each other. Zulu was not a fool. He could take revenge another day. His son-in-law had finally given him a chance to escape. He could not stand there and wait for death. He immediately flew out of the manor. Zulu moved, and Jia Gong Gong followed him like a shadow. Several golden threads shot out from his sleeves and stabbed Zulu's vital points. Song Ying held the knife in one hand and quickly approached Zulu. "Tang Jiao, give me your life." Su Buling stabbed Tang Jiao with a single sword, and his momentum was like a rainbow. Even if Tang Jiao was hacked to death, he dared not touch Su Buling, otherwise he would be wrong even if he was right, and the emperor could not protect him, so he could only retreat in fear. "Song Lord! Song Lord! Save me!" Song Ying was furious, but he could not ignore the weak-footed Wu Kuei appointed by the emperor. He could only hand Zulu to Jia Gong Gong, turned around and rushed to Tang Jiao, angrily saying, "You are obstructing the work of the investigation department, and your intention is unclear. Even if you are the prince of a vassal king, I can take you to Chang'an and let the emperor investigate carefully. The investigation department has the responsibility to supervise all officials and princes. Although it is a private act, almost everyone knows it. With Song Ying's official position, he can indeed send Su Buling to Chang'an for the emperor's political review, but without the emperor's permission, he generally dare not touch the son of a vassal king on his own initiative. At this time, he just found a reasonable excuse to drive Su Buling away. Su Buling knew what was going on. There were only 4 martial arts masters on the scene. If they fought against each other, Zulu would not be overwhelmed. However, this matter was too sensitive. It would be difficult to explain to the emperor, so he had to put on a good show. "How dare you suspect me of having ulterior motives? If you have a clear conscience, you should avoid it for now and settle accounts with Tang Jiao another day. Do I need to listen to your instructions when I am doing things? I will kill Tang Jiao today, even if the Jade Emperor comes. If you insist on obstructing me, don't blame me for offending you for doing my job impartially." In public, 3 warnings were fruitless, so it was natural for Song Ying to take action. As long as he didn't kill or maim him, even if Prince Su came, he would have nothing to say. Eunuch Jia was chasing the sword Saint Zulu alone, but it was difficult to capture him. Song Ying was also afraid that the great achievement he had just achieved would be lost. He did not hesitate any longer, put away his goose feather knife, and rushed towards Su Buling with bare hands, ready to capture Su Buling first and then help AncientChina. When fighting between troops, it is not allowed to use knives, otherwise the nature of the fight will change. Su Buling can kill the imperial guards with problems, but it is not easy to kill the emperor's close ministers who have not made any mistakes. The opponent is unarmed, and he will definitely be caught by the court if he uses a sharp weapon. At that moment, he could only throw the sword on the ground and face Song Ying with bare hands. The cold wind is like a knife, cutting across the mountains and fields. The long river is like a dragon, entrenched outside the manor. The four strongest warriors in Daio rushed to the bloody square before the long night ended and the dawn rose. The Tang family children who stayed behind retreated 100 steps, watching the warriors trembling in fear, afraid of being accidentally injured by the amazing skills under the high wall, and afraid of missing this duel that would surely spread throughout the world. AncientChina was famous in the Three Kingdoms for 60 years, Zulu Songying was the leader of contemporary warriors, at the age when warriors were the most powerful, and Su Buling was a rising star, the strongest of the younger generation. The most powerful martial arts leaders of the three generations of old, middle-aged, and young gathered here. It might be difficult to find a fight of the same scale even 100 years ago. Fists are afraid of young people, and sticks are afraid of old men. There are various results and different evaluations on the distinction between the strengths of masters in the rivers and lakes, but if there is no real fight, there will be no clear result. Because the warriors who have reached the pinnacle of the world cannot be calculated by common sense. Bang! The fist blew away the falling snow. Song Ying's black wolf guard clothes swelled up, and he strode forward like an unstoppable chariot. Although he had no sword in his hand, the speed of the Cao family sword was still displayed. The black robe was like a night crow flying on the snow, but in the blink of an eye, it crashed in front of Su Buling, who was in a white robe like snow. However, this swift punch did not hit anything except for a burst of fist wind. The blue stone floor tiles of the square were stepped on and lifted up, leaving two pits in the original place. Su Buling may not be as clever and flexible as Chen Daizai, but in terms of explosive power, the heroes in the world are no better. After the loud noise, Su Buling's body smashed the wind and snow, turned around and made a dragon tail swing, and his right leg turned into a powerful steel whip, whipping towards Song Ying's waist and abdomen. The force of this kick was so great that it almost tore the fabric on the leg. Just seeing the momentum made the martial arts fans watching from afar feel nervous. Song Ying knew that Su Buling had knocked down Xuechenzi, and he was not careless. However, the Cao family swordsmanship was fast, so it must be extremely strong and masculine, and use unparalleled power to drive the body to raise the speed to an extreme that ordinary people could not reach. To put it simply, Song Ying's way of practicing martial arts was faster than Su Buling's way of fighting in battle formations, and his strength was weaker. Apart from that, there was not much difference. Before the enemy met, it was difficult for each other to realize this subtle difference. Song Ying was slightly faster than Su Buling. Facing a kick that swept like a dragon's tail, he naturally chose to block with his right hand and grab with his left hand, trying to break the move and counter Su Buling at the same time. But using one hand to block Su Buling's full strength and almost brutal whip kick, the consequences were obvious. Bang! After the muffled sound, Song Ying's body paused visibly. Song Ying raised his right arm to block the whip kick, but failed to stop its momentum. The force of a mountain pressing down on his arm was too much for a single arm to bear, and was directly pressed against his chest, or bumped into his chest. Under the blow, the back of the Black Wolf Guard's tights was suddenly torn apart, and Song Ying's forward figure was instantly turned into a cooked shrimp. He was swept out by a kick while bending his waist, and hit the ground and cracked the stone bricks, and then bounced off the ground and continued to fly backwards. Wow! The onlookers in the martial arts world obviously did not expect that Song Ying, who had shocked the martial arts world for many years, would be kicked so far away in one encounter. Such a terrifying whip kick, if it hit any of them, would probably kill them on the spot. But Song Ying was not just a name for nothing. He might not be able to beat the swordsman Zulu in swordsmanship alone, but his overall combat power was not much worse than Zulu. After receiving Su Buling's whip kick and bouncing off the ground, Song Ying had already stabilized his body in the air, and his feet landed accurately on the dragon shadow behind him. Ah! Song Ying bent his knees slightly and jumped, rushing back horizontally at a faster speed than flying out. Su Buling swept out with a leg, and did not stand still to give the opponent a chance to breathe. He stomped on the ground and rushed out, almost following Song Ying, who flew out, intending to pursue the victory and kill him with a set of consecutive attacks. Song Ying bounced back from the screen wall without losing his balance, and naturally collided with Su Buling. Song Ying had already noticed that Su Buling's physical strength was a bit terrifying, and he could not treat him with common sense. When he rushed back, he had changed his tactics, jumped up in the air and performed a tiger climbing and hit Su Buling's jaw with his knee. For a mortal, the only moves that can bring out the most power are side kicks and knee strikes. A frontal hit will basically kill or cripple a person. If it is used on a master-level expert, it is easy to kick a beam and break a pillar. Su Buling is a man of iron and steel, and it is impossible for him to stand and let Song Ying kick him. He is not as arrogant as Song Ying. He roots his feet into the ground and crosses his hands in front of his chest. Bang! His knee hit his arm, as if hitting a wall. Su Buling's arms did not move, but his boots slid back a distance, leaving 2 grooves on the snow and gravel. After unloading the power contained in the Tiger Mountain climbing, Su Buling's hands were put back to his waist, and the Tongbaiman's signature skill Golden Dragon closing mouth was blasted out at this moment. Song Ying's reaction was not slow at all. The knee strike could not break the defense. His right hand stabbed 3 times in a flash, using his fingers as swords to point at Su Buling's forehead, throat, and heart. Every move is a sure kill. A half step slower means the difference between life and death. The onlookers, including Ning Yuhi and Zhu Manzi, just watched the excitement and had no idea what moves the 2 people used in the fight. In a flash, fists and feet met, Su Buling rushed out with 2 palms, and after hitting Song Ying's chest, he turned around and blocked his throat and heart with his arms, and fought hard to hit Song Ying with his forehead. After a muffled sound, Song Ying flew out again and hit the Panlong wall, directly knocking a gap in the broken Panlong wall. Su Buling also lost his unstoppable momentum just now, fell back on the snow, slid more than 10 steps away, and slapped the ground to stand up. There was an obvious red mark on his forehead, as if he had opened his eyes. Although it was just a finger and not a long sword, the power contained in this move was not small. After getting up, my head was still buzzing, and even my vision was slightly blurred. But no matter what, I resisted this time. Under the attention of many martial artists on the high wall, Su Buling waved his sleeves and rushed towards the collapsed Panlong wall again. Song Ying was hit by the Golden Dragon mouth in the chest, and was obviously more embarrassed than Su Buling. After hitting the Panlong wall, he fell to the ground with a muffled groan, then forced himself to get up, pulled out the Yanling knife at his waist, and rushed towards Eunuchia, who was chasing Zulu. Eunuchia, Zulu can be left to me. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 512. During the short time when Su Buling and Song Ying fought, the golden silk in Jia Gong's hand had already formed a spider web on the side of the square that would kill anyone who touched it. Zhu Liu's right arm was cut with 3 holes, and his fighting power was damaged. He was struggling in the middle, and it was difficult for him to get close to Jia Gong, but Jia Gong could not kill Zhu Liu for a while. Jia Gong came out this time to help the investigation bureau solve the problem, so he naturally saw how the chief of the investigation bureau arranged it. After hearing Song Ying's words, he stopped and exchanged the battlefield with Song Ying. Teng Xiao. Give me your life. Song Ying avoided the fight, so Su Buling naturally could not chase him. According to the original purpose, he rushed to Teng Xiao, who had already run to the outside, with his bare hands. Teng Xiao was shocked and unbelievable when he saw Song Ying running away. He was afraid of Su Buling's identity just now and did not dare to take action. Now he did not even have the idea of taking action, and turned around and ran to the back of the manor. Many people watching the battle were filled with astonishment when they saw the notorious Song Ying avoid fighting and treat Sword Saint Zulu as a soft persimmon. Although it was not a life and death fight with Song Ying, both of them had obviously used killing moves just now, but they did not use swords. At the level of Grandmaster, a finger can kill a person. Both sides did not use weapons to fight fists and feet, so there was no such thing as an unfair victory. Although the moves were not seen clearly, Song Ying obviously suffered a loss in both charges. Apart from other things, at least in terms of hard power and basic skills, Song Ying was obviously weaker than Su Buling, which was enough to determine the winner. But Su Buling was only in his early 20s, and he beat Song Ying so scared. Is he really a god? However, the scene made the people watching the battle regain their consciousness a little. Although Su Buling was still very powerful, he was at least immortal like everyone else and had weaknesses. Su Buling strode forward, chasing after the fleeing Teng Xiao. Before he had taken 10 steps, he felt a bone-chilling chill on his side. A large sleeve swept over silently, and by the time he noticed it, it was already close. Su Buling did not look down on Eunuch Jia at all. He hooked his 5 fingers with his backhand and grabbed the arm in his sleeve. When Su Buling faced Chen Daozai, his sleeve swung over like an iron plate, with an indescribable hidden power in it. Now, he reached into the sleeve swept by Eunuch Jia, but it seemed that he didn't touch anything. If it weren't for the touch of fabric on his fingers, Su Buling would have thought he had grabbed nothing. The wide sleeve blocked his vision. Before Su Buling grabbed Eunuch Jia's arm, he saw a knife coming out from under the sleeve and piercing his heart, as fast as thunder. Su Buling immediately withdrew his hand, but just as he retreated half a step, a huge pulling force came from his wrist, pulling him back. Su Buling's eyes changed slightly, he raised his left hand to catch the knife, and forced himself to bounce back, pulling himself out from in front of Jia Gonggong, landing 3 feet away. Jia Gonggong stood there, not chasing, but holding a thin rope in his left hand. The red rope was straightened in the wind and snow, and the other end was tied to Su Buling's right wrist, leaving a red mark. Su Buling broke the thin rope on his wrist with force, stepped back slightly, and made a fist. Eunuch Jia still looked calm and said slowly, "Your Highness, if it was replaced with gold thread, your right hand would be gone. Admit defeat, so that I can help Lord Song." Su Buling frowned slightly, "I am carrying a weapon, so I will not grab it with my hands." It seems that Eunuch Jia won unfairly. Eunuch Jia thought about it and realized that this was the truth. He loosened the string and shook his sleeves to reveal his dry hands. "Since your Highness is interested, I will accompany you for a few moves. Tang Jiao is loyal to the court. It would be difficult to report to the Emperor if I killed him. How about sparing him for now?" Su Buling was fully focused and said softly, "If he can stop me, he can't be killed." Eunuch Jia nodded, smiling peacefully. Bang! As always, he moved like thunder. Su Buling's boots cracked the already broken ground again, and he increased his speed to the extreme. He circled from the left side, swept up the gravel and snow on the ground with his right leg, and kicked towards Jia Gonggong's lower body. This time, the momentum was so great that the gravel and snow on the ground almost formed a curtain of waves. Jia Gonggong served the emperor in the palace, and he may have never shown a nervous and surprised expression on his face in his life. It was the same at this time. He raised his sleeves gently, swept away the snow foam and gravel that came to his face, stepped back half a step, and sighed in a duck voice. "You young people always like to make trouble with the floor when fighting. If you win, it's okay. If you lose, you have to repair the yard for others, which not only costs money but also wastes things. While speaking, Su Buling's horizontal sweep had already crossed Jia Gong's lower body. But Jia Gong took a step back, just right, and the hem of his red robe brushed against the sole of his shoe. Except for swaying a few times in the wind, there was not even a stain, and it was obvious that he didn't kick. After Su Buling swept his leg along the ground, he stood up and punched Eunuch Jia's side. The wind from his fists made a loud noise, and he was frightening even before he got close. You have great strength, but you have to use it in the right place. The prince has not even touched us yet, but he has already wasted a lot of energy with all his strength. He won't be able to hold on for long. Eunuch Jia turned sideways and passed his fist along his chest. When Su Buling changed his moves and prepared to elbow him, his right hand was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue and tapped Su Buling's ribs. Bang! It hit the target with one strike, and it was extremely accurate. Su Buling felt a sharp pain in his ribs, as if he had been stabbed with a knife, and he almost got a stitch in his side. Ha! Su Buling gritted his teeth and resisted with his strong physique, and smashed out the elbow. This time, he finally encountered someone, but Eunuch Jia immediately retreated. Following the powerful and heavy blow, he retreated and landed lightly about 10 feet away, unscathed. He shook his head and said, "It's easy to break if it's too strong. 100 blows are not as accurate as one. It only takes one to kill people. It's useless to put on so many tricks." Eunuch Jia always likes to say something when watching people fight, but what he says is by no means a taunt or a joke, but more like an evaluation and guidance to the younger generations of warriors. Su Buling's body was as motionless as a green pine, but his ribs were poked a bit hard, and even his breath was slightly disturbed. After exchanging moves, he obviously suffered a big loss. After the blow, Su Buling stopped and did not pursue. If we say that hitting Chen Daizai is like hitting mosquitoes with a cannon, although it is useless, it can at least cover him twice. Beating Eunuch Jia is just like hitting the air with a cannon. It is meaningless if the power of psychic energy cannot be used to hit him. Su Buling's face looked a little more serious, and he could clearly see the bottleneck in front of him. He grew up in the border army. When killing enemies in battle, he pays attention to the number of kills rather than the quality. There is no difference between cutting off the head and cutting off the legs on the battlefield. But this way of fighting the enemy is obviously very different from the way warriors catch and kill each other. His martial arts skills are not weak, but compared with Eunuch Jia's precise precision, they are a bit too rough. What Eunuch Jia said is not unreasonable. To put it bluntly, killing is just a matter of one blow. The question of whether one can hit or not, and other feints and real moves are just for the purpose of supporting this one blow. But this principle is easy to understand, but it is obviously difficult to achieve it. I am afraid that only Zhu Liu's sword has touched the essence. Su Buring was no longer in a hurry to rush forward, and stared at Eunuch Jia with all his attention. After a moment, he suddenly regained his momentum, stood up straight, put one palm in front of him, and made a line between the tip of his nose, the tip of his hand, and Eunuch Jia. Eunuch Jia narrowed his eyes slightly and nodded gently, "I'm sorry, but the prince is very understanding." The so-called 18 falls is a short fighting style that is relatively rare in the martial arts world. It emphasizes withdrawing and changing shadows, taking advantage of the situation to take advantage of the situation, detachment and transformation, avoid the sharp edge, hide the sharp edge, strike with diagonal strikes, and use skill to control clumsiness in a life and death fight, pay attention to seizing the fleeting flaws, use both attack, and use your strength to defeat the enemy. Eunuch Jia's martial arts skills are obviously derived from the Zhangyi Shiba Feng. The only person in the world who can break through the moves is probably Wu Dang's Baguazhang. Su Buring doesn't know Baguazhang, so the only way left is to use magic. Beat the magic. Su Buling could see Eunuchjia's skills so quickly and find a way to deal with it from the martial arts he learned. Eunuchjia was really amazed at his understanding. However, since Eunuchjia has learned from each other's strong points and made up for his own weaknesses, the skills he learned must be better than Zanyi Shibo fell so hard that he shook his head again and said. However, this old slave's thousand-layered miasma has a total of 7749 variables. I'm afraid the prince will not be able to cope with it. Su Buling stepped forward slowly, paying attention to the toes of Eunuchjia's shoulders and shoes from the corner of his eye, and said calmly. No matter how many variables there are, killing is just a matter of time. When Eunuchjia heard this, he smiled a little. It's really a good young man who practices martial arts. It's a pity that he comes from a princely family. Otherwise, Zhou reputation as unparalleled would have ended in this era. Su Buring did not answer any more and slowly approached Eunuchjia. Seeing that they were 1.5 steps away, about an arm's length away, he suddenly made a move and pretended to attack Eunuchjia's face with his right hand. Eunuchjia raised his arm lightly and held the palm that Su Buring slapped. Su Buling quickly picked up Eunuchjia's arm with his left hand, and at the same time pinned Eunuchjia's right foot with his left foot, withdrew his right palm, and slapped Eunuchjia's chest with the palm of his hand at a short distance. In this tricky moment, the palm strike was struck with an inch of force. It was far from the frightening power of the past, and there was not even the slightest sound, but the force was not much weaker. It's just that Eunuchjia is an expert in this way. After seeing through this move, he sighed softly. It's full of craftsmanship and not advisable. As he spoke, he raised his right arm up, pressed against Su Buling's right arm, and stroked sideways, causing Su Buling's body to tilt to one side, and the move was immediately broken. If a martial artist is defeated in a fight, he will inevitably be countered. When Eunuchjia raised his hand, he hooked Su Buling's hind legs with his toes, turned sideways and slapped Su Buling's back with his left palm, and with the combined force of his hands and feet, Su Buling was thrown out. However, this encounter did not end there. The moment Su Buling fell to the ground, he tapped his fingers on the ground, used the force to lift up, and kicked Eunuchjia in the abdomen. At the same time, he supported the ground with one palm and grabbed Eunuchjia's ankle with his left hand like an eagle's claw. Huh! Eunuchjia finally showed a bit of surprise this time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 513. Su Buling suddenly changed his moves, and Jia Gong narrowed his eyes slightly, showing a bit of surprise in his calm eyes. Because the moves Su Buling used had nothing to do with the 18 falls of the clothes. If you insist on talking about moves, it seems that the rabbit-kicking eagle of the Dantui school and the crane-catching hand of the eagle claw school were squeezed together and used forcibly. Among the many martial artists watching, there were quite a few boxing and kicking experts. Seeing Su Buling standing upside down with one hand and posing such a strange posture, they were a little surprised. If Su Buling was not the contemporary martial arts champion, they would all think that he was an apprentice fighting blindly. In this posture, let alone exerting force, the enemy would not even need to do anything, and he could break his neck first. But Su Buling's strength lies in that after years of martial arts practice, his body balance and muscle explosiveness are unparalleled. It is easy for him to stand upside down with one finger. The only difference between standing on one palm and stepping on the ground is that it is inconvenient to see things. Two completely different sets of moves were launched at the same time, without affecting the body balance at all, but the movements were extremely fast. Eunuchjia might have met such a freak for the first time in his life. He stepped back with his left foot and pressed down the sole of Su Buling's shoe with his right hand. At this moment, Su Buling's arm, which supported his body, suddenly bent and straightened, and he jumped upside down. His fists were like beating drums. In an instant, several punches rushed out, hitting Eunuchjia's legs from bottom to top, and at the same time, he chopped down his leg and hit the top of Eunuchjia's head. It is often said that a master can be killed by a random punch. Su Buling's upside-down punching method is probably the only one in history. Eunuchjia took a half step back again, and waved his sleeves in his hands, slapping Su Buling's chest and abdomen. No matter whether he was upright or upside down, his body was always in front, and he couldn't help but defend. But Su Buling really didn't defend himself. He was hit by a sleeve in his chest and abdomen. As his body flew backwards, his fingers hooked the ground and he fell to the ground. The moment he landed, Su Buling stomped his feet on the ground, like a fierce tiger pouncing on its prey, and bounced directly to Jia Gonggong's chest and abdomen. The moves just now were still strange, but this time it was caught off guard. Jia Gonggong only realized Su Buling's real purpose at this time. He fell upside down and turned right, with his upper body facing the opponent. He almost didn't need to get up to buffer time, and he could use his feet to bounce to the target again. The distance was too close and the speed was too fast. Jia Gongggong had no time to dodge sideways. He raised his feet and moved behind him, catching Su Buling's fist with both palms. This punch finally hit Jia Gongggong's dry palm, no longer hitting cotton and unable to exert force. Bang! The punch that gathered all the strength of the body was huge. Jia Gongggong's red eunuch robe swelled instantly, and the whole person shot back like a meteor. Wow! The warriors watching the scene were all shocked when they saw that Jia Gonggong, who had guarded the palace for 60 years, was repelled. Although it was just a repulse, this record was already an achievement that no one in the martial arts world could match. You have to know that Jia Gongggong has been famous for 60 years, but there is no record of him fighting with anyone, and no one he met could leave the palace alive. Su Buling couldn't touch the corner of his clothes just now, but in a flash he found a way to deal with it and was able to fight back. This understanding of martial arts moves was enough to make everyone present far behind. Everyone sighed and focused on the battle situation, and they didn't even have time to watch the fight between Song Ying and Zulu next to them. And Su Buling returned to his own rhythm, and immediately stepped on the ground with both feet, following Jia Gonggong's figure, trying to catch up and try a set of Jia Gonggong who had temporarily lost his balance. But at this tense moment, a woman's voice suddenly rang out from the crowd on the high wall. Disperse. The words were so powerful that many people in the martial arts world thought that some young female knight had no vision and ran here to stop the fight. As a result, when he turned around, he saw a bunch of small porcelain bottles turned into sharp arrows and shot towards the small square in the chaos. Hiss! Su Buling was chasing the figure of Jia Gonggong. He caught a glimpse of the small porcelain bottles that attacked indiscriminately. He felt cold in his heart and gave up the pursuit without hesitation. He hooked his feet on the ground and fell to the side. Zhu Liu's arm was injured, and he showed his killer move again. He had been in a stalemate with Song Ying. While the two were chasing, they found that someone threw a hidden weapon. In order to prevent being hit, they temporarily opened up a little distance. The next moment, bang, bang, bang. More than a dozen porcelain bottles broke in the square, and then colorful mist spread from everywhere. In the middle, there was a dark smoke, like a ghost that was choosing people to eat, and it spread out quickly. Dragon locking goo. The terrifying momentum of the poisonous fog was recognized by almost everyone who could reach the level of Grandmaster. Those who couldn't recognize it would understand it after hearing Tang Jiao's exclamation. Song Ying's face changed suddenly. Although the emperor had a way to detoxify, it would leave a root of disease if it was not completely detoxified. As long as a warrior was infected with the dragon locking goo, he would basically be useless. How could he dare to resist it? Even Zulu was slightly shocked. He jumped off the high wall without hesitation and fled to the periphery. The dragon locking goo was horizontal in the center, spreading out quickly with the wind. No matter how brave Song Ying was, he couldn't rush over to chase him. He could only watch Zulu go away and turned back to support Jia Gong, who had just landed. Jia Gong is old, and no matter how strong his martial arts are, his physical strength is no longer what it used to be. He took Su Buling's punch head-on, and although he did not suffer any external injuries, his face was obviously a bit sick. He raised his sleeve to sweep away the poisonous mist, and looked at Su Buling opposite him, with a bit of sigh in his eyes, and the regret of being born at the wrong time. A hero is only a hero when he is old. As a warrior, there is no opponent in the world for 100 years, and when he is about to die, he encounters the giant tree that has just sprouted in the sky. What could be more regretful than this? After Su Buletinling got up from the ground, he also remembered that he was not here to fight with eunuch Chia. Helping Zulu get out of the siege was the top priority. Seeing Zulu fleeing, Su Buling saw no point in staying. He picked up the weapon from the ground and fled to the other side. The place was filled with smoke, and all kinds of messy poisons confused the view. Everyone was running away. Tang Jiao had seen the tyranny of dragon-locking goo back then. Even the sword master couldn't get rid of it, let alone him. He quickly fled upwind, but when he passed under the wall, there was a sharp sword sound. The cry fell from the sky, accompanied by an angry and scolding voice. Tang Jiao suffers death. Su Buling, who was speeding, heard the sound and thought something was wrong. He raised his eyes and saw that it was Ning Yuhi who had come in from the high wall, holding a long sword that turned into a white rainbow and pierced Tang Jiao's back. Ning Yuhi's martial arts skills are not low, he can defeat Zhang Xiang and a half, and he is considered a first-class master in the world. But in today's Tang Jiazhuang, it's unclear whether he can even be ranked in the top 10. Tang Jiao was awarded the title of Wu Kui, and people in the world laughed at him, but they only laughed at Tang Jiao for being a laggard among Wu Kui. The weakest Tendan player was also a national player. After all, he was the leading boss in Yuzhu, and a female Taoist priest who had become a monk was if he could kill, he would have died hundreds of times. Hearing the sound of swords coming from behind, Tang Jiao shrank his neck in fright, but after hearing the sound, he found that the sound was very weak. It was not Zulu and Su Buling. He drew his sword and looked back. He saw Ning Yuhi coming, and he was immediately angry. I can't beat Zulai Ugjibuletinling from the bottom of my heart, but I can't beat you. Tang Jiao paused, turned around, and struck the back with his sword. He used one of the Tang family sword's killing moves, Yuxiachinki. The sword comes out like the sunset, cutting the line between heaven and earth, dividing the upper body and lower earth. Just because Tang Jiao is not good at it doesn't mean that Tang Jiajian is not good at it. This killing move, which is passed down from male to female, is the same as the Cao family's Dragon Gate 3 knocks. It is the most elite move of a swordsman family. It was used by Tang Jiao, and its power was not inferior to the four masters who had just fought. Ning Yuhi had never learned this trick before. He had just seen Tang Jiao transformed into Tang Baobao. He could bully anyone twice, and he was already on top. At this time, he jumped down and felt a chill in his heart. The sword penetrated the wall, trying to pull himself back. Tang Jiao was full of anger tonight. He was so mean and had many family members killed. How could he still have any sense when he caught such a weakling? He immediately jumped up and charged towards Ning Yuhi. But it's obviously not going to end well at the top. Tang Jiao ran straight to Ning Yuhi and couldn't catch up. When he turned around, he immediately lost his life that he had finally recovered. What a bastard! How dare you hit my woman? This time, Su Buling was really like a thunderous thunder. He ran wildly and jumped up a few feet away. The swords at his waist were unsheathed at the same time. His boots kicked the hilt of the sword fiercely, turning into two flying blades that broke through the wind. He came out, holding a spear in his hand behind him. The spear was like a swimming dragon and he took it straight to the middle gate of Tang Xiao. Rustle. 3 wind-breaking sounds came at the same time, forming an overwhelming force. Tang Xiao reacted as soon as he jumped up. His face turned pale in horror, and without even turning his head, he struck at the source of the sound with his sword and shouted at the same time. Master Song. It's just that it's your own fault that you can't survive, the dragon-locking goo is lying in the middle, and it's so far away, even a true god cannot save Song Ying. Ding ding. In the early morning light, 2 sparks burst out. Like a sick tiger in a desperate situation, Tang Jiao swung his long sword to deflect 2 flying blades, but the 2-foot-sharp blades that followed were not something he could easily block. Su Buletin's spear shot out like a dragon, and in just 3 strokes it flew away the sword in Tang Jiao's hand. Tang Jiao jumped sideways and tried to escape, but was pierced by the sharp edge and nailed directly to the wall. Ah! A scream sounded. Ning Yu held the hilt of the sword and hung it on the wall. Seeing this scene, his eyes were almost red with blood hatred for killing his mother. He fell from the air with a sweet sound, holding the sword upside down with both hands and stabbed directly at the back of Tang Jiao's neck. Tang Jiao felt the chill of death sweeping through his body. He forced himself to lift his breath and tried to pull his pierced right leg away from the blade to avoid it, but one of the boots had already reached his chest. Bang! Su Buling held the dragon-patterned spear pole, turned around and kicked Tang Jiao to the side, hitting Tang Jiao in the chest. The chest is sunken and the bones are cracked. The wall behind him immediately revealed a huge pit, and his kick almost penetrated Tang Jiao's chest. Ning Yu dropped his sword and almost pierced Lang Jun's leg. He quickly changed his move and raised his hand to draw the sword diagonally, hitting Tang Jiao's neck. The scream stopped abruptly. Bloody light exploded in the red dawn, and a huge head flew into the air, hit the snow again, and rolled far away, with a bit of terror still in its eyes. After Ning Yu slashed out with his sword, he was stunned when he saw the blood bursting out in front of him. It seemed a little unbelievable. It was unbelievable that the blood feud that had been carried on his body for so many years ended so simply with the sword. Down. Su Buling was not in a daze. Seeing that the dragon-locking poison was almost blown away by the wind, he quickly pulled out his sword, hugged Ning Yu's waist, and jumped up the high wall in 2 strides. In the morning light of the rising sun, speeding towards the outside of the town. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 514. Dad. You are so brave. Su Buling, you actually. The small square was in a mess. A series of scoldings rang out as people fled and dodged, and then disappeared in the colorful smoke in an instant. Not long after, the mixed poisonous fog slowly dissipated. The red dawn sprinkled on the small square full of corpses. The onlookers were frightened by the dragon-locking goo and scattered like birds and beasts. The children of the Tang family all fled to the back of the manor. In front of the incomplete Panlong shadow wall, Tang Jiao's headless body lay on the ground, and his head fell a few feet away. Ahem. Eunuch Jia swept the snow foam on the stone with his sleeves, sat down slowly, looked at the desolate scene in front of him, was silent for a moment, and sighed softly. This is the world of martial arts. Actually, it's not very interesting. Although Song Ying was not seriously injured, the fight just now was indeed a bit thrilling, like walking on a tightrope, and his face was still a little angry at this time. Seeing Tang Jiao dead and Zulu running away, he said in a deep voice. Su Buling acted recklessly and obstructed the investigation department, which led to the escape of the thief in the Eagle Tower and the killing of Tang Jiao. This is no different from treason. Eunuch Jia sat on the stone to rest and raised his hand. I am old, not a god. The rest of the things can be arranged by Lord Song. I was born in Yuzhou. When I fought in the past, I followed the soldiers to travel all over the country. Now, it is time to return to my roots. Song Ying paused. Hold on, although the detective department does need a master who can deal with Zulu and Li Hanzheng, Song Ying is not qualified to command this old eunuch who serves the three kings, no matter in terms of court qualifications or military seniority. He can only bow and retreat silently with his hand on the goose feather knife. The morning light shines on the snowy mountains, and fighting occasionally breaks out on the mountains and rivers. The people of the Eagle Tower scatter, and the elite wolf guards and the children of the Tang family chase them from behind. The turmoil did not end with the death of Tang Xiao. However, the people of Jianghu who escaped from Tang Jiazhuang have spread the big events that happened today at an alarming speed. Fight Song Ying first, then fight eunuch Xia, and then kill Tang Xiao. Such an incredible record, not to mention unprecedented, at least in the present, no one can surpass it. Regardless of the outcome, Lian Zhan did not suffer a big loss, which is enough to make people dumbfounded, not to mention that Su Buling obviously took advantage. The reputation of a man in the martial arts world is earned by punching one by one. Based on his current record, Su Buling deserves to be ranked as the top martial artist. Even Zulu, who showed his power as a swordsman today, was overshadowed and became a foil for the newcomers. However, as many people have said, Su Buling is good at everything, but he is wrong in that he should not be born in a royal family. From the perspective of kings, princes, generals, and ministers, what Su Buling did today was all stupid. In order to help his master avenge his personal grudge, he not only did not help the court to investigate the case and arrest the thief, but also made trouble. He not only fought with Jia Gonggong and Song Ying, but also killed Tang Xiao, who served the court. If this was heard by the emperor, even if he was not accused of colluding with Zulu to plot treason, it would not end well. Of course, Su Buling didn't care about this. At least compared with the current situation, he didn't care what the emperor felt thousands of miles away. On the hillside of the snowy ridge, the morning breeze was rustling, and the warm winter sun made the weather a little warmer. Ning Yuhi hugged Su Buling's arm, crying non-stop, but not sad, but with a smile of tears of joy. She said something incoherently. Ling thank you, if my mother knew about it, she would definitely rest in peace. Tang Xiao, the bastard, is finally dead. The blood feud she had carried for many years was paid with blood, and the enemy was killed with her own hands. Ning Yuhi put down the burden in her heart and completely became a little woman. She hugged her husband's arm, had 1,000 thoughts to express, but didn't know how to express them. Only gratitude remained in her eyes. Su Buling felt warm in his heart, walking on the snowy ridge with a long spear, while shaking off his tail. He was also looking for the whereabouts of Manzi and the others. Seeing Ning Yuhi crying with joy, Su Buling raised his hand and hugged her shoulders. Master, I just did it casually, there is nothing to thank you for. Ning Yuhi shook her head, with tears on her jade-like cheeks. She hugged Su Buling's arm in her arms, hugged him tightly, and said softly. Without you, I can't kill Tang Xiao. Anyway, thank you. From now on, I will withdraw from the world and hide my identity. I will do whatever you want me to do. When Su Buling heard this, even though it was dangerous just now, he was satisfied at this time, and smiled with curved eyebrows. Really? Really? Ning Yuhi was full of emotions and didn't know how to express it. She bit her lower lip and looked around, then stood on tiptoe and kissed Su Buling's face. Still feeling that it was not enough, she pushed Su Buling to the ground and said softly. Ling are you tired? Let me serve you. Su Buling was not tired at first, but he felt tired immediately after hearing this. He took a breath and sat down under a big pine tree on the snowy ridge, shaking his head and laughing. Master, what are you thinking about? You are still outside for most of the day. How can you serve me? I. Ning Yuhi was excited and grateful. He forgot all the etiquette, integrity, seniority, and hierarchy, and even threw away his identity as a Taoist priest and master. He knelt down beside Su Buling and said softly. I will serve you in any way you want me to. I can do anything. Su Buling coughed slightly and looked around a few times, but there was no one around. The hearty battle just now had already made people excited. Now it seems that a little battle to relax the mood is not a problem. Master, you're having your period. I know, I know how to do it. Ning Yuhi's face turned a little red. He stared at Su Buring's face. After hesitating for a moment, he put his charming figure on Su Buring's lap. He raised his hand to untie the string of his clothes, revealing a peony embroidered with lotus. Belly band. Under the morning light, the beauty is as beautiful as jade, and she is incomparably beautiful. It was just broad daylight and the barren mountains and ridges made Su Buling feel a little unnatural. He raised his hand. Master, respect yourself. Ning Yuhi paused as he untied the belly band on his back and said doubtfully. Huh? Don't want it? Su Buling blinked. Well, I'm just saying, if you want to reject it, you can welcome it, you just continue. Oh. Ning Yuhi nodded softly, and after a while, he said with a slight embarrassment. Your child, can't sit down. Forget it, master, just lie down. Good, dash. The red sun unknowingly hung over the snowy ridge, the weather became warmer, and the remaining soldiers in the mountains disappeared completely. White robes were spread on the ground, bringing a touch of spring to the snow-capped mountains. Twitter. At some point, a little sparrow landed on the bare branches of the big pine tree, looking curiously at the strange man and woman below. Under the big pine tree, Ning Yuhi had sweat and tears on his cheeks. He was lying on Su Buling's arm to rest. He saw birds emerging from the tree and pushed the man's arm. Your Majesty, someone is here. Su Buling was really tired this time. He was basking in the sun with a grass root in his mouth and didn't want to move much. But the little sparrow arrived first, and Zhongli Jiju would definitely appear immediately. He couldn't sleep with his master in front of Miss Jiju. Su Buletinling turned over, put on his robe, and said with a smile. Master, you are so considerate. After being tortured for a while, Ning Yuhi's mood had stabilized, his gentleness and shyness had returned, his face turned a little red, and he regretted his impulsive behavior just now. But everything has been done, and as long as Su is not happy, it's no big deal. Ning Yuhi tied up his robe and temporarily put the Tang family's affairs behind him. He looked at the little sparrow above and said softly. Ling have you fallen in love with Zhongli Jiju? Having just experienced the master's careful care, Su Buling, no matter how thick-skinned he was not embarrassed to say anything that Ning Yuhi didn't like, so he looked around and said. Well, Miss Jiju is very capable. If she hadn't taken action today, I don't know how long the fight would have lasted. It would be very difficult to escape. Women are very sensitive, and so is Ning Yuhi. Seeing that Su Buling didn't directly deny it, he knew that Zhongli Jiju must have used tricks to seduce Su Buling. However, Ning Yuhi's mother was the side wife of the Tang family. She had suffered so much from the favored women and hated the behavior of bullying other people based on their husband's favor. She hesitated and said softly. Ling if you like it, I won't stop you, even if you like King Yi, I will be my master honestly and just stay with you secretly, but Zhongli Jiju, a woman with evil intentions and many tricks, fell in love with you. The back house will definitely cause trouble. If you like her beauty, just let her in casually. Don't make a big scene, and don't let her ride on others. Just let her be the youngest. Otherwise, you girls will, I have to be bullied to death by her. Well. Su Buling chuckled and had no comment on this. Ning Yuhi just didn't like Zhongli Jiju. Seeing that Su Buling was still hesitant, he frowned. Ling I'm serious, she knows all the tricks, and her ability to please men is pretty good if you think about it. If you spoil her now, She won't be able to go to heaven in the future. Yo yo yo. While he was talking, a sweet voice came out, and Zhongli, who was trotting over on the snow, appeared above the mountain and took a look. Ning Yuhi, what are you explaining to your apprentice? You won't say bad things about me again, will you? You have to be moral when traveling in the world. Sister, I helped you a lot today. As he spoke, Zhongli eyes scanned the snow beneath the two of them, and he could clearly see the shapes of certain parts, such as knees, elbows, etc. This posture. Ning Yuhi noticed something was wrong, so he swept it with his white embroidered shoes and destroyed the crime scene. His expression returned to its usual otherworldly appearance, and he said in a lukewarm tone, "Do you think everyone is like you and likes to make things difficult for others behind their backs?" This was a clear conscience. In Ning Yuhi's view, she had just said good things to Zhongli and did not drive Zhongli away. Zhongli eyes looked a little strange, but it was hard to say anything. He just glanced at the gentlemanly Su Buling. Su Buletinling calmly picked up the weapon leaning against the big pine tree and walked towards the top of the hillside. "Miss Jeju, thank you very much." Zhongli eyes were strange, but his expression was quite normal. He walked up to Su Buling, walked side by side, took the weapon over, and said with a smile, "Don't just say thank you. Sister, I didn't take advantage of you in vain. There are only 3 bottles of dragon-locking poison mist in total. The bottle I gave you doesn't count. This bottle is my life-saving thing. For the sake of our friendship, I'll give you a discount. Is it not too much to ask for 50,000 taels of silver? What other strange poisonous mist?" Ning Yuhi's eyes showed a bit of dissatisfaction. He walked between the two of them, squeezed Zhongli away, and said coldly, "Why don't you go and rob the treasury? With goo insects in hand and the poisonous mist inexhaustible, how can it be as valuable as you say?" "Hey dash." Zhongli was not convinced and threw the sword to Ning Yuhi. "What do you know, a layman? Do you know how long it takes to save a bottle of poisonous mist? Poisonous insects are nourished with blood. I only eat those that replenish qi and generate blood. Medicinal materials cost a lot of money every year." Su Buling didn't want the two of them to quarrel when they met, so he naturally had to make peace and said with a smile, "If you invite Miss Jeju to be a guest, I will take care of all the expenses. There is nothing to say. But Miss Jeju, why did you throw away the locked dragon goo just now? I feel that it is not that far." Zhongli sighed, shook his head and said, "You're fine. Zulu was beaten 3 times by Mr. Jia and couldn't stop the bleeding. He was also entangled by Song Ying and couldn't get away. If he continued to beat him, he would lose too much blood and be dragged to death. Man Zi asked me for help, so I took action. Otherwise I also wanted to see if you could beat Eunuch Chia." Speaking of Eunuch Chia, Su Buling thought about it and shook his head helplessly. "It's just that I'm young and strong. In terms of martial arts, I'm far behind. However, Eunuch Chia also taught me a lot today and I benefited a lot. If I go back and study for a while, I shouldn't be as helpless as I am today." Ning Yuhi nodded lightly. Eunuch Chia, Wu Kuei is an outstanding figure in his generation, and he can restrain a martial artist like you who takes a fierce approach. It's strange that he can defeat you. You are still young, and practicing martial arts is a lifelong matter. As long as you don't relax, there will always be a day when you will look down upon the world. Su Buling nodded and asked, "Where are Manzi and the others?" "I stayed in Chin County. Eunuch Chia didn't hold back when he beat Zulu. The 3 wounds caused by the gold wire were very long. I stitched them up, but I will definitely not be able to use force again in a short time." Su Buletinling nodded lightly and led the 2 girls out for a distance. Suddenly he remembered something and glanced towards the far east. Ning Yuhi noticed Su Buling's gaze and looked at it. There was nothing there, so he asked, "What's wrong?" Su Buling was silent for a moment and chuckled. It's nothing, let's go. Oh. Ning Yuhi and Zhongli Jiju didn't know what was going on, so they didn't ask anything and followed Su Buling's footsteps one after another. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 515. The Crown Prince is very fierce. The red Luan swims in the sea in the Dragon Scale Shadow chapter. The tide rises every year. Wow! Wow! In the clear blue East China Sea, the boat used by Prince Su to pick up his bride cut through the waves, leaving a constant white wake on the azure curtain of the sky and sea. On the bow deck, Lu Hongluan, wearing a dark green dress and a furry shawl, stood facing the wind. The sea breeze blew her long hair, and her charming face showed a mixture of disappointment and longing. She looked at the coastline at the end of her field of vision and remained silent for a long time. I remember that last year on this day, I was still staying in the Jinghua Yuan villa in Chang'an City. In the early morning, Ling put on the robe that she had sewn by herself. She kneaded the dough and kneaded a big colorful steamed bun and took it out. A few candles were called cakes to give her a birthday. The appearance of the cake was really ugly, and it looked unappetizing, but at least it was made by your own hands. She and Yunu took it back to the house solemnly, and then the three of them sat together, cut the big steamed buns into pieces and divided them into pieces, and then... It tastes worse than it looks. Lu Hongluan pursed her lips, feeling a little funny in her heart, but even though it wasn't delicious, she still finished eating it. She gained 2 ounces of weight and didn't care because it was made by your child. In a daze, this day has arrived again. Unfortunately, at this moment, Ling is no longer around. Last year, Lu Hongluan probably never dreamed that he would be able to leave Chang'an in this life and appear in this place surrounded by waves and without any mountains, rivers, or buildings. After staying in Chang'an in the northwest for a long time, standing on the bow of the ship on the sea, the scenery you see is naturally magnificent. Song Yufu, who had never been to the seaside, even gave up her old ways of being knowledgeable and sensible, and became similar to Zhu Manzi. With the clairvoyance honed by Xiang she stood on the terrace looking left and right all day long. There are endless views on the sea. But the magnificent scenery in front of him was not attractive in Lu Hongluan's eyes. There is only one place in her world where Su Buletinling and Su Buletinling are there. Even if the house is surrounded by bare walls and the ground is desolate, it is a rare fairyland on earth. On the contrary, even if she is in the Moon Palace, it is just a pile of stones. That's all. In the blink of an eye, it had been many days since he had seen Ling and it was this day that he would experience every year. From the moment he woke up, Lu Hongluan missed that face with a bright smile, and wanted to go back to last winter and sit together. The little days of cutting big steamed buns. That was a home, a small home that only belonged to her. It's a pity that now, there are more and more new people coming to the family, she is no longer the only one, and there are many trivial matters that have nothing to do with her. Maybe in this life, I will never look forward to the past, where there were only 2 people in Chang'an City, caring for each other and respecting each other as guests. This was the source of Lu Hongluan's loss, but she had already seen it clearly. For her, she was content to be able to grow old together with your child until the day she closed her eyes. As for where he is and who are around him, it's just that the environment has changed slightly, and his heart has not changed from beginning to end. What's more, the current environment is not much worse than the 2 people were together before. Hongluan, aren't you afraid of freezing to death? Why are you standing outside in the early morning as a watchman? The tender words came from the windows of the ship. The sea breeze slowly blew the flag on the ship. Xiao Xiang who was dressed in a gorgeous red dress, with a golden hairpin on her head and a pretty face, leaned against the window with her arms folded and called out. Xiao Qi was holding a tray with 2 side dishes in it, as well as Mrs. Chang'an's favorite Qingyu brew. She showed her cheeks from behind the window and said softly, "Hongluan, come up quickly." I fried 2 side dishes with my own hands. You can try how they taste. Xiao Qi's words were obviously heartwarming. However, Song Yufu, who was walking up, and Xiao Xiang'er, who was leaning against the window, both showed a bit of fear in their eyes. Miss Xiao is good at everything, but she has been too strong-willed since she was a child. She has been thinking about the general trend of the world and deducing calculations all day long. She has never learned the cooking skills and female celebrities that her daughter's family should learn. Now that she is getting married and has been relieved of the heavy responsibility that has weighed on her for more than 10 years, Xiao Qi is naturally ready to be a good wife and learn what a woman should know. But no one is perfect, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. Xiao Qi is as intelligent as any man in the world, but her cooking skills are really hard to describe. However, Xiao Qi's aura was very strong. Lu Hongluan and Xiao Xiang'er both dared to be angry but dared not speak. Song Yufu stopped talking and kept silent during the meal without daring to say a word. No one dared to find fault with Xiao Qi. Since boarding the ship, the 3 women have hardly had a good meal. Xiang'er couldn't bear it, so she secretly asked Jiao Yi to open a small stove. Xiao Qi, who was very perceptive, found out. When asked, she could only say, "The food cooked by my sister was so delicious that Hongluan took all of it. I wasn't full, so I asked Jiao Yi to make some more." The result is self-evident. Xiao Qi was so inspired that she gave Xiang'er a good patch of health and was moved to tears. Lu Hongluan cooks for Su Buling all year round. She is a good cook, but she is also afraid of Xiao Qi's cooking. But today, Lu Hongluan felt warm in her heart. No matter how unpalatable it was, Ling'er's cooking was not unpalatable. It was considered a little custom at home. Lu Hongluan's eyebrows were arched, and he turned around from the bow of the ship and walked towards the ship's building. The eldest lady is interested. Xiao Xiang'er looked at the coast and said softly, "That's right, today is a big day. Hongluan, you should eat more. If you lose weight, Su Buling will come back and say that we sisters have treated you badly." Song Yufu also nodded quickly, "Yes, I used to be given the dishes. If I eat more, I will be fatter than Miss Zhu. It's better for madam to eat more. You are young, it's right to eat more to replenish your body." Lu Hongluan smiled and looked back to the north when she approached the cabin. The sun rises in the east, and the morning light begins to shine. The warm winter sun shines on the blue sea and the thousands of miles of snow. The sky and the earth are vast and boundless. Facing the gentle sea breeze, Lu Hongluan took a serious look. She might not see anything, but she knew that at the end of her vision, there must be a pair of eyes looking in this direction. After all, when she was thinking about Ling'er the most, how could Ling'er not think of her? Auntie Lu's birthday event is here. Thanks to the big boss, pot-baked pork is really delicious for the reward. 18,000, please give me some monthly votes. It seems that I am not far from the 1-star rank in Masterpiece Hall. Please give this chapter some likes. Those with high activity will get more active points. Thank you. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gongzi. Chapter 516. A chaotic war in Tangjiazhuang has temporarily subsided, but the aftermath is unlikely to dissipate. Yuyang County, Pingwu County. The Pingguolan Sea, which stretches for nearly 100 miles, is located between the mountains and snow ridges, with no end to the east and west and no borders to the north and south. 50 miles away from the Peach Blossom Sea, on the coast of Jinhu Lake, the residence of Kui family of Yuzhu in Xiaolu Kui Wang Li was built here. As one of the 5 great clans, the Kui family's incense inheritance is not much shorter than that of the Xiao family. Speaking of ancestors, they can count them back to the spring and autumn period. However, Yuzhu belonged to the state of Yan during the spring and autumn period, and the presence of the state of Yan was very sparse among the vassal states. In fact, there were only a few ancestors of the Kui family that could really be used. The Kui family of Yuzhu has been passed down for generations, and they follow the golden mean. They don't fight, don't rob, and don't make enemies. Whoever becomes the emperor assists which family. After several dynasties have changed, their status has not changed much. Among the 5 great clans, they have always been representative of the good old guy. However, as aristocratic families grow and develop, none of them started their careers by being a mere moron. On the surface, they may be doing nothing, but behind the scenes, there must be an inhumane and dark side. If the law of the jungle is not the law of the jungle, why should others give up the position of one of the 5 major surnames? Deliver. After all, they climbed up by stepping on the mountains of corpses of other families, even the royal family. Let's talk about contemporary times. The dragon-locking goo puzzle that almost removed the hands and feet of King Su's lineage was the work of the Kui family and the current emperor's conspiracy. Farther away, there was the assassination of Ningyu and the robbery of the queen, etc. Being able to do these things is enough to show that among the 5 great families, the Kui family is almost the most utilitarian. Everything they do is to surpass the Huainan Xiao family, become the leader in the court, and even the best family in the world. However, after the locking dragon goo puzzle was solved by Su Buling's method of taking advantage of the enemy, attacking the east and attacking the west and secretly trapping Chen Kang, the Kui family was obviously left out by Songji. They are currently in a period of silence and have not caused any waves. For a wealthy family like the Kui family, Yuzhu and even the entire world are just a small fish pond at their feet. They occasionally look down at it, but they never take it to heart. However, no matter how detached from the world, his family is in Yuzhu, he only has one life. 10 years ago, when Tai Ying was hunting deer, the Kui family, as one of the pillars of the imperial court, took action against the Zhu family, who was also in Yuzhu. Although it was just a trivial incident that did not even alarm the family head, but the son came to take revenge, it would not be unreasonable. Because the Kui family thought it was a trivial matter, the Kui family still invited Sidu Yuejin, the #1 person in the Tianese martial arts world, to come to their home as a guest, just in case something unexpected happened. At noon, Kui Huiyu, the eldest uncle of the Kui family, burned incense and made tea in the waterside pavilion along Jinhu Lake to entertain 2 guests. The waterside pavilion is built near the lake, and a harp girl plays music next to it. On the road along the lake shore, you can see the young master of the Kui family, running to the distance to take a look at the waterside pavilion. In front of the tea table in the waterside pavilion, Sidu Yuejin, the sword leader, put his elbows on his knees and sat on the floor with a bold posture. He held a wine bowl in his hand, his nose was red in the wine trough, and he was speaking boldly. This Su Buletinling is really powerful. I thought he would be at least a draw with Song Ying, but I never thought of knocking Song Ying out with random punches. The younger generation is to be feared, the younger generation is to be feared. Titles such as Sword Master, and Gun God are the highest honors that people in the world can obtain. It is even harder to win in martial arts competitions. Their gold content can be judged from the reputations of the 3 sword masters, Zhu Kexin, Lu Beiming, and Zhu Lu. I can get a rough idea. The title of Sword Master changed hands 3 times in 10 years, and Xuechenzi and Chen Chong have been fighting for the title of Spear Master for many years without any results. Now that Xuechenzi has fallen, Su Buling has appeared again, and it still has not been decided. As for Dao Kui, it had fallen on Sidu Yuejin 20 years ago, and no one else had ever taken over. Sidu Yuejin is only in his early 50s now. Since his early 30s, he has become the leader of Dao's swordsmen, and no one can compete with him until now. The storytellers in tea houses and restaurants told the most about the deeds of the world, that of Sidu Yuejin. What about chasing Kun Yunzi with one sword, going straight up Liudane Mountain with one sword, breaking down Dongting Lake with one sword, and so on? The Tianese Thousand Blade sect was originally a little-known sect in the world. After Sidu Yuejin came out of the mountain, he used a 9-ring knife to cut the Thousand Blade sect from south to north, from east to west, and cut the Thousand Blade sect into pieces. He is now a top sect alongside Liu He sect, and his fiery and heroic temper is well known to everyone. Unlike Chen Daozai and other famous figures in the world, Sidu Yuejin was born in the grassroots and had a strong sense of business. Sitting in the Kui family's reception area in Yuzhou, he was spitting, slapping the table and glaring without any trace of Wu Kuei demeanor. The world has long been accustomed to this. Sidu Yuejin has this kind of character, and Kui Huiyu didn't show any dissatisfaction, just talking and laughing. Next to Sidu Yuejin, Song Ying, who had just arrived from the Tang family, still looked a little gloomy. After listening to Sidu Yuejin's comments, Song Yingke looked at Kui Huiyu and said, "Mr. Kui, this time Song was ordered to come to Yuzhou to arrest the gangsters in Dainglu. Prince Su made trouble for no reason, causing the traitor Zulu to escape, and Tang Jiao was also killed on the spot. Such a serious mistake, Prince Su would. If we don't give an explanation, how will our criminal investigation department act in the future?" Kui Huiyu nodded slightly with a slight smile. Prince Su's move is a bit arrogant, but he is using the pretext of revenge for Ning Yuhi, and has nothing to do with the Yinglu rebels. Mr. Song's ginseng for him, the Holy Spirit can only give him a few scoldings, which is not painful. Kui Huiyu is the younger brother of Kui Huilu, the imperial censor, and one of the two backbones of the Kui family in Huainan. With the in-law relationship of Empress Kui, the Kui family has a close relationship with the current emperor. Song Ying is the emperor's confidant, united front with the Kui family, and her words are not meaningful. Song Ying suffered a loss at the Tang family and messed up the case. It would be difficult for him to report to the emperor when he returned. He said in a deep voice, "I have reported Su Buling. The emperor can do nothing about him. I will give the emperor a letter of divorce and ask for permission to bring Su Buling back to the capital. The emperor will personally ask about the reason. What do you think, Mr. Kui?" Kui Huiyu hesitated a little when he heard this. He naturally understood what Song Ying meant. The current emperor and the lineage of Prince Su were secretly strangers. He said that Su Buling would be taken to Chang'an for questioning, but once Su Buling entered Chang'an city, he would never get out in this life. No matter how open-minded Song Ji was, he would never let the hostage go back again. Now Su Buling openly disrupted the court's investigation and privately killed the good people who were loyal to the court. Taking this opportunity to let Su Buling go to Chang'an to explain his motives is indeed a way. No matter whether it works or not, it can always disgust Prince Su. Do you have the guts to disobey orders when you are in the wrong? Then continue to explain why you dare not go to Chang'an. Kui Huiyu thought for a while and said softly, "This is a matter of great importance. Let's ask the emperor first. But even if the emperor allows it, it will not be easy to take Su Buling back." Song Ying was waiting for this sentence. He raised his hand and said, "I am writing to the emperor. However, the people I brought to Yuzhou this time are not enough to deal with Su Buling and potential threats. Can Mr. Kui help me?" Kui Huiyu knew that Song Ying came here to borrow people. After thinking about it, he looked at Sidu Yuejin. The thief Zulu was injured in the Tang family. I don't think he will come to the Kui family again. Can Mr. Sidu help Mr. Song? Sidu Yuejin has a very good relationship with the court. His younger brother and son are all serving in the court. Naturally, he raised his hand. As long as the emperor agrees, I will naturally do my duty. Hearing this, Song Ying felt relieved and breathed a sigh of relief. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 517. It was already the 12th lunar month, and the new year was approaching, and people in Jin County were crowded together. The big event that had just happened in the Tang family did not affect the people's work and rest. Only the Gulan restaurant, where people from all walks of life gathered, talking about the changes that could shake the entire world. On the north side of the county, the alleys in the civilian areas are covered with thick snow and there are few people around. The surrounding houses are relatively dilapidated, with only a few elderly people living there. Su Buling carried the dragon-patterned long stem wrapped in black cloth and walked deep into the alley. There was this wine jar hanging on the top of the long stem. It was the best local peach blossom wine in Jin County, specially brought to his father-in-law. Ning Yuhi walked on Su Buling's right side, helping to hold the sword. Although Ning Yuhi has been practicing martial arts for many years and has a flexible body, no matter how high his daughter's martial arts skills are, not everything is indestructible. She was forced to stay at the inn last time, and she resisted fiercely. Su Buling just had a taste of it and didn't go too far. She asked for it just now. By the time she regretted it, it was already too late, so she could only bear it. Although he wasn't injured, but he still feels a little uncomfortable and feels weird. Anyway, he is embarrassed to speak. Zhongli Jiju walked on the left side of Su Buling, because she had known about Ning Yuhi and Su Buling for a long time, so she didn't have any worries in her heart. At this time, he was holding an expensive silver fox fur coat in his hands, and there were a few more hairpins in his bun. Under the comfort of money, the pain in his body, which was caused by the loss of pressure on the baby at the bottom of the box, also dissipated a little, and he said with a smile, "Su Buletin, don't think of sending me away with this small favor. This is interest, and the money you should give cannot be less than a penny." Su Buletin certainly didn't buy these things for Jeju to repay the favor. The last time they kissed, Jeju made it clear. However, Zhongli Jeju insisted on settling accounts and drawing a clear line. Naturally, he would not show any courtesy casually. He just nodded. That's natural. Ning Yuhi became angry when he saw Zhongli Jeju like this, and replied, "If you are greedy, you will fall into trouble sooner or later." Zhongli Jeju said cut and ignored it completely. While chatting, they came to an abandoned house deep in the alley. The nightingale was entering the yard carrying a bucket. After seeing the three people, she ran over with admiration in her eyes. "Master, you are so amazing, and Sister Jeju." Zhongli Jeju smiled brightly and nodded, "That's right, sister, I helped a lot. It's not like that person who ran to kill Wu Kuei with this sword, but couldn't hold him back and escaped only after being hugged by his apprentice." Ning Yuhi's face turned a little red, but she was indeed infatuated. It was hard to explain, so she could only snort coldly. Several people entered the abandoned courtyard and looked up to see Zulu with a bandage on his arm, sitting on a chair under the eaves with his eyes closed and concentrating. But closing your eyes and concentrating is not meditating to regulate your breath. When Su Buling entered the yard, he saw Xiao Manzi standing next to his father with his arms crossed, his eyes wide open, and he was chattering fiercely. "Dad! Why did you hide it from me? Why did you run away from home? Do you know how I came here all these years? I lived in precarious life and lived a simple life. I slept from 3 to 5 every day. I even had to plan to buy some clothes for the new year. After thinking about it for a long time, I spent all the money I saved on you. The days are precarious, sleeping in the middle of the night and getting up in the fifth." Su Buling recalled how Xiao Manzi went to the tea house and listened to storytelling every day, and for a moment he didn't know how to evaluate it. Sword Master Zulu lost all his majesty at this time. He sat on the bench with his eyes closed and pretended to be dead. He didn't say a word for a long time, looking like, "I'm meditating, don't disturb Dad." It's just that they haven't seen each other for more than 2 years. Manzi turned from 14 to 16. It's self-evident how much grievances and longings he felt in his heart. He crossed his arms and chattered endlessly, looking like he was going to annoy his biological father to death. However, after seeing Su Buling coming back, Zhu Manzi stopped talking, and his fierce face suddenly turned red. It was like his boyfriend was caught secretly by his father. He glanced around a few times and took advantage of Zulu not opening his eyes. Opening his eyes, he hurriedly ran into the house without even saying hello. Ning Yuhi and Zulu were not familiar with each other, so they nodded slightly and ran to find Xiao Manzi. Zhongli Jiju is a doctor. No matter whether you are a sword master or a martial arts master, you have to obey her instructions when you are injured. Zulu does not have the awe of seeing his seniors. He behaves naturally and walks under the eaves, dragging Su Buling to a halt. Here comes the stool. Come and sit down, I'll show you if you're hurt. This was not the first time Su Buling met Zulu, and there was nothing to be nervous about. He sat down on the stool next to Zulu with the wine jar, asked Juju to check his body, and said, "Uncle Zhu, how is your injury?" The annoying girl finally hid in the house. Zhu Liukai took a long breath, opened his eyes, and said in a calm voice, "Thanks." Su Buletinling smiled kindly, "It's just a little effort. With my relationship with Uncle Zhu, it's my duty to do it when I encounter that kind of situation." Zhongli Jiju sat on a small bench, put Su Buling's hand on her thigh, took her pulse carefully, and joked after hearing the sound. "You can do it? If it weren't for my sister and me, both of you, father-in-law and son-in-law, would have been beaten to death." Su Buletinling's expression froze, and after thinking for a while, he had nothing to say. Zulu did not deny this, nodded and said, "Thank you for your help. Miss Eunuchia is a man with superb martial arts skills, which is difficult for ordinary people to match. Even if I fight alone, it will be difficult to take advantage of him. As for Prince Su, I have nothing to do with my bare hands. I am still able to get close, but if I use a sword, I am afraid I won't be able to touch the corners of Eunuchia's clothes." Su Buling nodded. Eunuchia has lived his whole life to protect the three emperors of Daewoo. It would be unbelievable if he didn't have this ability. However, Eunuchia is indeed old and unable to do what he wants. The day I can catch up will probably be very long. It's a pity that we can't fight each other again. Zulu snorted lightly. Since ancient times, outstanding people have emerged from generation to generation in the world. Every time you take a step forward, you will encounter fewer opponents, but there will never be a shortage. There is no true invincible in the world. Wait until you have gone far enough. If you are far away, you will understand. Su Buling frowned slightly when he heard this. Is there anyone in the world whose swordsmanship is better than Uncle Zhu's? Zulu simply shook his head, no. Yes, it means that if you can show off, Mr. Taishan, as a son-in-law, I can only be in awe and not be arrogant. Su Buling couldn't talk back to his father-in-law, so he humbly accepted the advice and nodded seriously. Zhongli Jiju's martial arts skills can only be regarded as longer between the two, but his views on martial arts are not low, and he added with a smile. Contemporary sword masters are naturally unparalleled in swordsmanship. However, there are many strange people in the world. In a real life and death fight, no one has a 100% chance of winning. Just like me, I will definitely not be able to beat you two with my fists and kicks, but I can't beat you two with my feet. Throw in the locking dragon goo, and you two will definitely run away. Zulu nodded, that's true. When the manpower will eventually be exhausted, no matter how high the martial arts is, one person and one sword can't solve everything. You can still escape when you encounter the locking dragon goo, but when you encounter the crossbow array of the border army, you can't solve the problem with a single crossbow. The arrow can be shot for 1,500 steps without even a chance to escape. Su Buling said with a smile, that is natural. If it were not so, the people who rule the world would be warriors, and there would be no literati with pens. After casually exchanging a few words about martial arts practice, Zhongli Jiju checked the internal energy and blood flow, and after they were stable and normal, he began to check whether the wounds on Su Buling's body had collapsed. But just as Zhongli Jiju pulled down the robe from Su Buling's shoulders, she found a few red marks scratched by fingernails on Su Buling's back shoulders. She couldn't help but wonder. What kind of trick did this leave? The injury is so strange. Zulu was a master of martial arts and had a deep understanding of all the martial arts moves in the world. He turned his head and glanced, ready to help Zhongli Jiju solve his doubts. However, he saw the scratches on his future son-in-law's back shoulders and his eyes as sharp as swords. Obviously stiffened. With this kind of injury, anyone who is not a yellow-haired boy will know how to catch it, not to mention Zuliu's daughter running all over the world. Su Buletinling's expression froze, and his old face that had always been stern and unusual turned slightly red at this time. He coughed lightly and pulled up his robe, and said calmly. The situation was chaotic. It should have been an accidental scratch. Zhongli Jiju was still a young girl, and all she knew about men and women was in medical books. The medical books did not say that after men and women have sex, nail marks will be left on the shoulders and back. She frowned and said, "Do you think I'm stupid?" He was obviously caught. Judging from the angle, it should have been from under the ribs to the back, but the force was very light. Having said this, Zhongli Jiju finally realized what the posture was. Her charming cheeks turned red. Without saying a word, she stood up, kicked Su Buling's legs, turned around and ran into the house. There was silence under the eaves. The two men, Wen and his son-in-law, who were not yet officially married, stared at the snow in front of the court, relatively speechless. Su Buling wanted to slap Jiju on the butt twice, but obviously there was no chance at this time. He hesitated for a moment and chuckled. It's snowing a lot this year, well, why didn't Auntie come? Manzi misses her very much. The father-in-law views his son-in-law, no matter how good he is, as a pig that treats cabbage. What's more, Su Buling, on the surface, is a talented man with both civil and military skills, but secretly he is a playboy. Zulu couldn't help but cut Su Buling with his sword, and his daughter was peeking in the room. What else could he do at this time? The snow is quite heavy. Manzi's mother is not very skilled in martial arts and has lived in seclusion. I will go look for her after I finish my business and survive. Oh. Su Buling sat upright and thought for a moment. By the way, Li Hanzhong should have gone to Bodhi Island, and he hasn't arrived yet according to the time. I was in Longtan a few days ago and met Chen Daizai and a master who was sent by the king of Chu. Did not show up at the Tang family, so he must have gone to Bodhi Island. When Zulu heard this, his eyes narrowed slightly and he turned his head. Sure. Su Buling nodded, it's absolutely true. The sword wounds on my body were all caused by Chen Daizai. I returned a few blows to him at that time, but it only hurt my left arm, so it shouldn't affect my combat effectiveness. Zulu frowned, no one else should know about this matter. Li Hanzhong only took 2 people with him to Bodhi Island and left all the elites in the building with me. If Chen Daizai went to Bodhi Island, something might happen. Su Buling naturally knew that something was going to happen, and that something big was going to happen. He asked. Is King Wu looking for the imperial seal? The rules of the world are not passed down between 2 people. I think that swordsman is Ding Yuan, the number 1 swordsman under the command of King Chu. His skills are not bad. Can Li Hanzhen's leader be able to defeat the 2 of them together? Zulu thought for a moment and shook his head. The enemy is in the dark and we are in the clear. No matter how good your martial arts skills are, the boat will capsize in the gutter. After saying this, he stood up and said, I will go find the rest of Dainglu. See you in the world. Zhu Manzi, who was pulling Dabai to eavesdrop, was unhappy when she saw that her father was about to leave without even mentioning her name. He ran out of the house and said anxiously and shyly, Dad, we just met, Why did you leave just as you said? Zulu, like all fathers, is not very good at dealing with his daughter's love affairs. He looked back at Manzi and said softly. Girls cannot be kept at home when they grow up. Dad has some things to do. You can make your own decisions on some things. Your mother won't stop you. After saying that, he stood up and jumped onto the wall. Zhu Manzi looked anxious, but more reluctant. He ran to the yard with a bit of grievance. Dad, why are you running? I know martial arts, it's not like I can't help. Ningyu knew the seriousness of the matter. It was difficult for the family to reunite in the martial arts world. Zulu couldn't stay with Manzi until he finished his work. He walked out of the door and pulled Manzi. Life is long, there will always be a time to meet again. Manzi, be good, send your father off. Zhu Manzi puffed his cheeks and stared at Zuliu's back. His big eyes were obviously moist. After a long silence, he let out a faint "oh." Su Buling also stood up, walked to Manzi, and looked at the wall. Uncle Zhu's right arm was injured. If he doesn't get it repaired, he will be hard to defend against the enemy. Be careful. No one wants to die if they can live. I will be there to drink at your wedding day. After Zulu responded, he jumped down from the wall, and after a few jumps, he disappeared between the houses. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 518. The abandoned house became quiet, and the nightingale lit a fire on the earthen stove to cook. White mist rose from the pot, and the aroma of the food floated into the small courtyard. Ningyu took Zhu Manzi's arm, pursed her lips, and wanted to say a few words of comfort, but she had never felt any father's love since she was a child, and she didn't understand Manzi's current mood, so it was difficult to speak for a while. Zhu Manzi's eyes were red and he stared at the direction Zulu was leaving. After a while, he cried out. My father doesn't want me anymore. Su Buling sighed, took Zhu Manzi's little hand, and said with a smile. Why are you crying? It's not like I won't come back. Why are you just like a little girl who hasn't grown up? Zhu Manzi might have been angered by his own father, so he choked up and said aggrievedly. Dad has run away. He must be crying, but he can still laugh. Humph, he doesn't want me, and I don't want him anymore. I won't look for him anymore. Su Buring had nothing to say, so he raised his hand and pinched her cheek, which could be regarded as comfort. Zhu Manzi felt a little aggrieved, but he didn't like being coaxed like a little girl. After choking up a few times, he raised his hand to wipe his tears and changed the subject. Forget it, let's not talk about him, Mr. Su. When you rescued Sister Daning in the Tang family, you seem to have said, "How dare you touch my woman?" It sounded weird. Ningyu's expression froze, then he remembered this, his face turned red instantly, and he glared at Su Buling. Su Buling's expression was very natural, and he laughed and said, the situation was quite chaotic at that time. The master is a woman, and it is my master, so I just shouted like that. Yeah. Zhu Manzi had a quick mind and glanced at Ningyu, feeling a little weird, but she knew that Ning Qingyi had been kissed mouth to mouth by Su Buling, so she didn't dare to imagine the scene of Ning and Ning lying together for nothing, but in the end she still not much to say. Ningyu didn't dare to talk about this kind of thing, so he changed the topic softly. Ling what should we do now? The Tang family's affairs have been settled. Should we go to Benzhou or? The purpose of Su Buling's coming to Yuzhu was to find out what King Wu was doing. Now that King Chu had also intervened, he definitely couldn't leave halfway, so he responded softly. We still have to go to Bodhi Island. Master, you take Manzi to Benzhou and wait. I'll take Jeju and Nightingale there and come back when I'm done. When Ningyu heard this, his soft cheeks showed some hesitation. I'm good at martial arts, but in the Tang family I'm just superior. Zhu Manzi was very aware of current affairs at this time and pulled Ningyu together. Ning, what kind of martial arts do you have? You can't even pull your head back. Zhongli Jiju suppressed the shame in her heart and walked out of the room, smiling and joking. Manzi is still sensible, he, your martial arts skills are really useless. You have to rely on my sister to fight Wu Kuei in an arm wrestling match. You should go back and rest. Ningyu he had been practicing swordsmanship for many years, how could he admit in front of Zhongli Jiju that he was not as good as him? He said slightly angrily. What's the use of you? The dragon locking goo is gone, so why don't I just throw away the itching powder? Zhongli Jiju hugged her bulging chest and raised her slender eyebrows. The poisonous mist is still inexhaustible if the poisonous insects are still there. How can there be no mention of it? You. Ningyu he was shocked by his original words and frowned, then you still dare to ask for such a high price? What does it have to do with you? This is a deal between me and Su Buling. Zhu Manzi saw the two rivals quarreling again. Su Buling pretended to be watching the scenery and pretended to be dead. He pushed Ningyu he into the house very sensibly and said with a smile. Okay, it's very dangerous for me to go to Benzhou alone. I am the daughter of the sword master and I have many enemies. Sister Daning is protecting me. Mr. Su, please rest assured. This was enough, Ningyu he said lightly humph, pulled Manzi into the house, and stopped talking to Zhongli Jiju. Su Buling secretly breathed a sigh of relief, praised Xiao Manzi secretly, and then sat back under the eaves, letting Zhongli Jiju continue to heal. Soon after, the omnipotent little nightingale prepared the meal and placed it on the stone table in the deserted courtyard. The 5 people sat together and had a simple meal, and the sky gradually became dark. Everyone had been working hurriedly for 2 days and was already exhausted. They just cleaned up the rooms in the abandoned courtyard and took a rest, preparing to continue to the next destination tomorrow morning. In the past 2 days, Su Buling had been traveling and fighting, and had asked his master to find another way. He had wasted all his hard work, and was already exhausted physically and mentally. He lay down in a small room with good ventilation from all sides, using the nightingale as a pillow, and lay down to eat. Fell asleep. Drowsily, half asleep and half awake. I don't know how long it took, but Su Buletinling felt a pat on his chest. When I opened my eyes, it was completely dark outside. There were no lights in the abandoned courtyard in the deep alley, and I couldn't see my fingers. Nightingale huddled in her chest, hugging Su Buling like a heater, and whispered. Sir, Daji didn't sleep well and went outside to sit and enjoy the cold wind. Su Buling was so deep in sleep that he really didn't notice it. At this moment, he looked sideways and realized that there was a dim firelight under the eaves of the small courtyard. Su Buling hesitated for a moment, then lifted the thin quilt and covered it again to prevent Nightingale from catching cold. Then he walked out of the house with his robe on and came to the yard. In the dilapidated courtyard, the small bench was still placed under the eaves, a candle was placed on the steps, and 2 erected tiles blocked the cold winter night wind and emitted a dim light. Zhu Manzi sat on the bench where her father had Saturday. Maybe it was too cold. She was wrapped in a yellow jacket, holding her face with both hands, curled up in the furry collar. She looked quite cute in the dim firelight. Her eyes were full of spirit and sparkling, staring at the flames under her feet. I don't know what she was thinking. Su Buling walked slowly to her and glanced down. Manzi, what are you doing? Zhu Manzi held her face with her hands, looked up and saw Su Buling coming over, and sat up a little straighter. Nothing, I just missed you a lot before I saw my father, but after I really saw him, I didn't think about you much anymore. Su Buling dragged the stool over, put it next to Manzi and sat down, unfolded his robe, put it on Manzi's back, and put his arm around her shoulders. If you don't miss your parents, then what are you thinking about? Zhu Manzi glanced and saw that everyone else had fallen asleep. She blushed and giggled, leaning against Su Buling's shoulder. What else can I think of? My father doesn't seem to dislike Mr. Su, and let me arrange it myself. I thought about it for a while. Su Buling frowned slightly. Miss Zhu, we are brothers of the opposite sex. What brothers? Zhu Manzi was finally a little embarrassed, wrapped her robe tighter, leaned in Su Buling's arms, and said softly. We are like this, kissed and touched. If Mr. Su doesn't admit it, my father will break your legs. Su Buling's eyes showed a little smile. That's right, then Miss Zhu, how are you going to arrange it? Zhu Manzi stared at the candles in front of the two of them and pondered. Well, among the girls, we are the first to know each other. Fuebao is older than you. Oh, she is a teacher, close to the water tower, and she didn't do anything with Mr. Su at that time. I went through fire and water for Mr. Su, and we are friends at the risk of my life. That's true. Of course, Zhu Manzi said seriously. Xiao Ning came later than me, not to mention Chu Chu, the little fox, who still doesn't know where she is. In the future, if I marry Mr. Su, I will be considered the eldest sister among the girls. Isn't it the youngest? What do you mean by youngest? Zhu Manzi frowned and said seriously, the rules of the martial arts world are first come first served. Mr. Su should call Xiao Ning his senior sister. Why should I be the youngest? Nightingale is the youngest. Su Buling smiled warmly and held his hand tighter. Then our Manzi, who do you want to be? The eldest, is definitely not possible. Zhu Manzi secretly glanced at Su Buling. Forget it, Mr. Su asked me to be the youngest, so I will be the youngest. Who made my sword master father don't want me? The voice became smaller and smaller. Su Buling lowered his head and looked at the pair of watery eyes, and moved closer. Manzi looked at each other, and then lowered her head quickly, twisted a little, and wanted to get up and go back to the house. Woo! Under the dim candlelight, in the small courtyard on a winter night, four lips met. The two looked at each other for so long. From their first meeting on the streets of Chang'an to now, Zhu Manzi had been taken advantage of many times, but she just wouldn't let Su Buling kiss her. She kept covering her mouth with her hands and making excuses like I'm still young, no. At this moment, Zhu Manzi finally stopped blocking and avoiding. She closed her big eyes tightly, her body stiffly tilted, her face up, and she didn't even dare to breathe, holding her breath with a red face. After a while, the tension on her face and the stiffness of her body relaxed. She leaned softly in Su Buling's arms, took a deep breath, and then continued to hold her breath. Su Buling had a smile in his eyes. He realized that Xiao Manzi was about to suffocate himself to death, so he raised his hand to pinch his cheeks, separated them slightly, and pulled the red little face into a round pancake. Okay, go back to sleep. Well. Zhu Manzi glanced at Su Buling, raised her hand to pinch Su Buling's face and pulled it, and then ran back in a daze. Su Buling shook his head and chuckled. After glancing at the candle on the steps, he stood up and went back to the house. In the room of the simple courtyard, Ning Yuhi was listening to the wall. When he found Manzi running back, he quickly closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. Zhu Manzi closed the door and fell on the bed with a yi-yi-ya. Ning Yuhi, who was lying flat, was almost choked by the pressure. Then he rolled over and over, rolling the quilt open. Ning Yuhi couldn't pretend to sleep anymore. He opened his eyes and looked at the dishonest girl with some amusement. Manzi, what are you doing? Zhu Manzi covered her cheek with her hands and rolled on Ning Yuhi for a long time before she recovered. With a bit of shyness, she crawled in front of Ning Yuhi and said shyly. Ning, Mr. Su just kissed me, do you know how it feels to kiss? Oh, you are a Taoist priest, anyway, it's very strange, I was stunned. Ning Yuhi blinked her beautiful eyes, looked at the young girl who was just beginning to fall in love, and didn't know what she thought of, and said inexplicably, "You are so arrogant, you will suffer in the future." "Huh? What do you mean?" "Nothing, I'm going to sleep." "Oh, hee. Thank you for the reward from the leader of heaven's little gate. Thank you for the 20,000 reward from the meat is so delicious. Thank you for the 10,000 reward from listen to people's laughter. Thank you for the 10,000 reward from listen to sleepcook. Thank you for the 10,000 reward from listen to the arrogant little white zero. I gave it to you again yesterday. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 519. Early the next morning, outside the east gate of Chin County, Zhongli Jiju stood at the fork of the official road, took out several packages of medicinal powder from the bag on the side of the horse, weighed them carefully with a small scale, and divided them into two. Zhu Manzi was wrapped in a goose yellow coat, and her little face was full of seriousness. She stood with Nightingale, staring intently, and murmured in a low voice, "Dazhong, you can't be biased. If she follows you out, Jinshui Tower will definitely find a way to turn on a small stove. If she asks you for it, you can't give it to her." Nightingale folded her little arms, her big braids hanging down from the back of her head, her body straight and her expression plain. "We are going to have a fight, not a winter outing, so we don't have time for this. Anyway, it has to be fair. People in the world have to settle accounts with their own sisters. We are not sisters yet." Muttering. On the other side of the official road, Su Buling walked with his horse, took a handwritten letter from his arms, and handed it to Ning Yuhi. "Master, after you return, ask Xiao Qi to send this letter to my father as soon as possible." Ning Yuhi took the envelope and put it into his arms. Kinkan's eyes were obviously filled with reluctance. After turning his head and glancing at the three girls, he moved a little closer and pressed against Su Buling's sleeves. "Don't be brave when things happen, and pay attention to King Yi. Also, Zhongli Jiju, you must be careful, don't be deceived by her, she has the temper to go up to the house and remove the tiles if she is given a ladder." Su Buletinling smiled kindly. Seeing that Manji and the others were not paying attention, he secretly put his hands behind Ning Yuhi's sleeves and squeezed, "I know. Your Majesty, please be more serious." Ning Yuhi's soft cheeks showed a bit of blush, but she did not dodge. She allowed her apprentice to be frivolous and glanced down, and, "There is also the matter of Xiao Gongsha, I can't even take a shower without you here. You have to do it secretly, Manzi will definitely become suspicious after a long time." Su Buling thought for a moment, "Master can hide it carefully. If you can't hide it, go to Xiang. She has prepared the paints. She can help Master paint it first." When Ning Yuhi heard this, his face was slightly startled, and he frowned and said, "Xiang, she knows. Xiang is smart. He sleeps with me every day. How could he not notice it? Master, don't worry, Xiang won't laugh at you. When we get back, the three of us will be together." Spit dash. Ning Yuhi shook his head quickly, took a few steps away, got on his horse, and turned around and said, "Manzi, let's go." Su Buling shrugged his shoulders, "It's just a matter of sitting down and chatting together, not doing anything together." "Master, why are you so nervous?" Ning Yuhi now understood Su Buling's true appearance. At that time, it was not what Su Buling said. Ning Yuhi had a slightly strange expression. He hesitated for a moment, then saw Manzi running over and whispered, "Xiang agrees, what can I say as a teacher?" After saying this, he quickly rode on his horse, picked up Zhu Manzi, who was running over, and ran to the far side of the official road. Zhu Manzi held the small package and was trapped under Ning Yuhi's arm. He babbling and said angrily, "Ning, what are you doing? I haven't said goodbye to Mr. Su yet." Su Buling looked amused, raised his hand and waved. "Manzi, slow down on the road and take good care of the master." Zhu Manzi struggled to sit down behind Ning Yuhi, hugged Ning Yuhi's waist, turned around and said with a smile, "Mr. Su, have a good trip." The horse's hooves galloped, and the sound gradually faded away. Su Buling watched the two of them disappear at the end of the official road, then turned around and mounted the wind-chasing horse, and embarked on the official road to Liaxi County. "Miss Jeju, let's go." Zhongli Jeju sat sideways on the big red horse. Her old enemy Ning Yuhi ran away. Her demeanor returned to the cold look of the fairy sister. She nodded gently and drove the horse ahead. The waves crash against the shore, and the sky and sea are boundless. Yuzhu is a remote place in Daewoo, while Liaxi County is on the edge of Yuzhu. It is a vast area with sparsely populated areas and barren countryside. Apart from the magnificent scenery of mountains and seas, there is nothing worth mentioning. At noon, Ning Qingyi rode the stolen horses and strolled in the coastal wilderness, looking for clues on the snow. Born in Shu and raised in Changqingguan, Ning Qingyi had never been to the beach. When he saw the sky and sea at the end of his field of vision, he had no interest in it. Fanyang County took a surprised look and discovered Li Hanzhen's whereabouts, and Ning Qingyi followed him. Li Hanzhen's horse was so fast that he could only see his back and had no intention of stopping. She snatched a few horses along the way and gave chase, but after following him to Liaxi County, she still lost track of Li Hanzheng and could only look around aimlessly. She knew that she couldn't kill Li Hanzheng, and she didn't know what to do after catching up with Li Hanzheng. She tried her best to chase him, just to see what the man who didn't even care about his wife and daughter being in dire straits would say to her. Although he didn't catch up, Ning Qingyi seemed to understand at this moment. Nothing to say. If he didn't even have the courage to stop and be questioned face to face, what could he be expected to say? The sea breeze was cool and cold, and before I knew it, it started to snow heavily in the wilderness. Ning Qingyi led the horse to a forest, climbed up the ancient tree, sat on the branch, folded her arms and scanned the endless coastal wilderness in front of her. The skirt on her body was not thick, and the biting cold wind mixed with the wind and snow made her limbs feel uncomfortable with the cold. Looking at the snowy sky in front of her, for some reason, she thought of that very warm fox fur and the person who gave it to her. That seemed to be the first time she accepted a gift from someone other than master. When Ning Qingyi was less than 10 years old, she went to Changqing Mountain and became the apprentice of a female Taoist priest. Dependent on each other, staying in a small Taoist temple with poor fragrance, and maybe not seeing many outsiders all year round, the concept of love only exists in one's own imagination, relatively slow, not understanding of the world, but clear grievances and grudges. If Su Buling was kind to her, she would naturally have to repay him. I wanted to do something for Su Buling to repay the kindness of saving my life, but I found that Su Buling was highly skilled in martial arts and held a high position. He seemed to have everything but coveted her beauty. Ning Qingyi has never thought about the relationship between men and women when she has grown up. Although she has not become a monk, she was brought up by her master and already regards herself as a Taoist priest. Men are from another species. How can they commit themselves to each other? But Su Buling went too far. She kindly inquired about the whereabouts of Dragon Lock Gu to repay her kindness, and then kissed her. I remember running away and spending a month and a half alone to recover. I have a lot of words hidden in my heart and I don't know what to do. I really want to talk to the master, but the master is also missing. I can only stay alone in the small Taoist temple, holding the fox fur, thinking about how to solve this difficult problem. Later. Ning Qingyi couldn't remember what happened next. He went to Cao's house in Juncheon and reunited with Su Buling. It was smooth, neither far nor near, and he didn't seem to encounter any trouble as expected. Now that I have been with Manzi and the others for a long time, I actually like the life with a lot of people. A lot of people live in the same yard, playing, talking and laughing. It is completely different from the days in Changqing Temple. Master seems to have she liked it quite a lot, so she stayed. Ning Qingyi had never thought about what would happen in the future. She might not go back to Changqing Temple. Instead, she would go to Suzhou with Master and Su Buling, rebuild a small Taoist temple, and then live like this. Sitting in the snow forest with the rustling sea breeze, Ning Qingyi's slender arms hugged her knees. The confusion and helplessness of the present and the future were intertwined, making her cold eyes look a little dull. While she was lost in thought, Ning Qingyi suddenly heard the sound of paper being blown by the wind. Rustle. There were no living creatures in the snowy forest, so the sound was obviously too abrupt. Ning Qingyi came back to her senses, held the hilt of her sword, looked at the source of the sound, and saw a middle-aged scholar standing in the distance of the woods below. He held a black oil paper umbrella in his left hand and a black oil paper umbrella in his right hand. The brush is drawn on the rice paper, which is hung on the tree trunk and blown up by the sea breeze. Su Danking. Ning Qingyi was stunned for a moment. Last time she was in Ziajiazhuang, she saw Su Danking from a distance. She didn't understand why this world-famous painting saint came here inexplicably and found her. Ning Qingyi was about to jump down and ask, but Su Danking, who was painting, quickly raised his brush and said with a warm smile, "Girl, don't move around. It looks good just like that. The painting will be finished soon." Finished painting. Ning Qingyi froze on the branch, with a strange meaning in her eyes. She naturally understands what Su Danking is doing now. Maybe from tomorrow, she will be famous all over the world. The master is the leader of Suanhe Bagui. Ning Qingyi has seen a lot of them since she was a child, but she doesn't think he is that powerful. He is far less solid than the sword master. She has been famous since she was a child, but she has never taken it to heart. She became the Zinba. It's not unusual to succeed, but it's not uncommon to fail. But she never expected that Su Danking would find her while she was in a daze far away from the central plains. Ning Qingyi hesitated for a moment, maybe remembering the envious looks in Manzi and Fuebao's eyes. She finally followed the advice and didn't move. She continued to sit on the tree with her knees in her arms and asked, "Senior Su, how did you find me?" Su Danking is painting, and sometimes he looks up. I happened to be passing by and bumped into him. It's good luck. Ning Qingyi was straightforward, but not stupid. He looked at the desolate area on the border of the empire and asked, "Why did Senior Su come here?" Su Danking chuckled, "Come here and take a look at the scenery. Su Buling seems to be coming soon. Is the girl waiting for him here?" Ning Qingyi was stunned for a moment when she heard this. When Su Buling arrived in Fanyang County, Ning Qingyi had already left, so in Ning Qingyi's mind, Su Buling should have taken the boat back to Suzhou to get married. Why did Su Buling come to Yuzhou? Is it because of the Tang family's affairs? The matter with the Tang family has been settled. Tang Jiao was decapitated by your master. He came here probably to find something. Ning Qingyi was confused. What are you looking for? Su Danking shook his head. It's a very important object anyway, I don't know. Oh. Ning Qingyi was slightly confused, but she didn't say much. She sat on the tree with her knees in her hands. After waiting for a while, she asked again. "Mr. Su, how beautiful am I?" When Su Danking heard this, he smiled brightly and shook his head. All the girls who entered the painting, except Kui Zioan, have asked similar questions, but you are the most direct. Ning Qingyi frowned slightly. Really? My master also asked. Of course, when your master was 15 or 16, he performed a sword dance and asked, "How do I compare with the 7 sisters in front of me, What Xiao Xianger said was, I am the best in the world, do you understand? Zhongli Chuchu also said, either you don't paint, or you are the best in the world, haha. Then what did the gentleman say? How else can I answer? It's unique in the world. If I say anything else, I'll definitely be beaten to death. I can only say it privately after leaving. Ning Qingyi tilted his head slightly, pondered, understood the meaning, and did not ask the question of which rank, but instead said. Why didn't Queen Kui ask this? Su Danking paused with his brush, thought for a while, shook his head and sighed softly. Everyone loves beauty, but there are always exceptions. The girl was too eccentric, and she may have never paid attention to how she looked. She shouldn't have painted it at the time. She got drunk and made mistakes, and hurt the girl badly. Ning Qingyi heard from his master that Su Danking got drunk and mistakenly entered the peach blossom forest. At that time, it was the Kui family who secretly spread rumors to attract Su Danking. Later, she entered the palace and became the queen, and died of depression at a young age. It was all the calculations of the emperors and generals. In fact, it had little to do with Queen Kui and Su Danking, and it couldn't change the result. Ning Qingyi was silent for a while, but didn't know how to comment. After a while, Su Danking put away the imperial gold pen, took the scroll and walked under the tree, and handed it to Ning Qingyi. Ning Qingyi jumped down from the branch, took the scroll, and looked at it carefully. The scroll showed flying snow, a lonely branch facing the sea, and between the vast sky and earth, a woman was leaning on a branch, with a long sword at hand, looking into the distance, and only a profile could be seen. Although the brushwork was concise and simple, the charm was portrayed to the bones, and even she herself felt a deep sense of familiarity. However, Ning Qingyi had rarely come into contact with these literati's elegant playthings since childhood, and apart from looking comfortable, she could not see any doorway, so she rolled up the scroll and put it away solemnly. Su Danking clapped his hands, raised his hand and called the horse parked in the distance, and took a package from the side of the horse. The package was not big, and it was just enough to hold it with both hands. It was square, and it should be a wooden box inside. Su Danking handed the small package to Ning Qingyi. Since we met, please bring me something and give it to Su Buling. Ning Qingyi took the small package, which was a bit heavy in her hand. She was a little confused. Liaxi County is so big, where can I find him? I'll tell you a place, you just wait there. Oh. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Zi. Chapter 520. Riding day and night, Su Buling arrived at Liting County in the evening 2 days later, only 10 miles away from the sea. Close to the sea and in a remote area, Liting County was quite prosperous more than a decade ago. Many merchants unloaded their ships here, then entered the mountains and ridges by land, bypassed the border defense line, and sent various goods to northern Qi. However, after the trade route was destroyed by the court, the number of ships coming here decreased sharply, and the docks are now abandoned. Su Buling entered the slightly desolate county. Except for a river, there were no other houses for people to stop. There were many abandoned warehouses on both sides of the Luan River, and the shadows of the merchants in the past could still be vaguely felt. Zhongli Jiju had been walking around Yuzhu for a while, so she naturally took on the role of a tour guide, walking in front and explaining. This is Liting County. Bodhi Island is on the seashore, and it faces Yuechuo Island 6 miles away in the shape of a yin-yang fish. It used to be quite lively here, and there was a big escort agency there, but it seems that it has been destroyed by the court. Amid the cold wind, Zhongli Jiju walked slowly, wearing a water blue long skirt and a silver fox fur coat. With her tall and graceful figure, she was gorgeous, noble, charming, and seductive, especially the proud lower body that could not be covered by the thick fox fur. As she walked, she outlined a tense arc under the fox fur. Sometimes when she turned around, She could see the collar under the fox fur tie, which was bulging as if she was dissatisfied with the fox fur and skirt restraints, and wanted to come out and breathe. From behind, she looked like a charming lady who had just come out of the prince's mansion to get some fresh air. However, her charming face did not reveal her age, and she even had a bit of the immaturity of a girl. It might be more appropriate to say that she was a little fox raised in the prince's mansion who came out to get some fresh air. Such a seductive scenery made the snow scenery of the world pale in comparison. Nightingale stood straight and led the horse. Although she looked serious and solemn, her big eyes full of spirit always fell on Zhonglijiju's figure, and then she looked down at herself, full of the meaning of "Che foxy girl." There was nothing to see in the surrounding scenery, so Su Buling's eyes naturally did not look elsewhere. He walked side by side with Nightingale. Perhaps he wanted to comfort Nightingale, and he said, "Don't worry, it will be fine when you grow up." Nightingale moved closer, looked at Zhonglijiju's waist and hips, and said seriously, "Young master, when I grow up, can I be like that?" Su Buling blinked, shook his head and sighed, "Well, body shape is innate, gourds will never grow into pears. When you are 16 or 17, you will probably be about the same as Fuebao, a little taller." Nightingale's eyes became more sour when she heard this. Zhonglijiju talked to herself for a long time, and seeing that the master and servant behind her didn't listen at all, and were still talking about gourds and pears, she stopped wasting words. Anyway, she charged by the hour, and she had to pay silver whether she did anything or not. The three of them led the horses to the center of the town. There were a few more people on the street, and there were also some dusty wanderers. As the saying goes, wealth and honor are sought in danger. The more the court suppresses, the higher the benefits will be. There are always people who dare to take this risky road, but they obviously dare not make a big fuss. They are all in a hurry and don't show their wealth. The only place with some noise on the street is the brothel on the street. In the evening, the entertainment venues have opened. Several middle-aged women are standing at the door of the brothel, wearing heavy makeup and smiling flatteringly. Seeing Su Buling, who is well dressed, walking over, they raised their hands and greeted him as if they saw a walking gold nugget. "Sir, come in and play, the goods are good and cheap, you will be satisfied." Zhonglijiju is not a graceful woman. When she heard this, she replied, "Can't you see my sister? How can you attract customers like you? Oh, how can domestic flowers smell as good as wild flowers?" Padash. Zhonglijiju was too lazy to argue with the brothel girl, so she led the horse and left. Su Buling found it a little funny, shook his head and said nothing. Under the guidance of Zhonglijiju, Su Buling came to an inn in the center of the town and asked for 2 rooms. After putting down the gifts, Zhonglijiju let the little sparrow out. If you want to find someone, no one in the world can compare to Zhonglijiju, who specializes in evil ways. It is obviously impossible to search for the whereabouts of Li Hanzhong, Chendaizai and others on such a large island plus the entire leading county by manpower. The little sparrow is much more convenient. It flew twice in the air and could come back to report as long as it found any trace. After letting the little sparrow go, because it was late and they had traveled a long distance, the 3 of them were tired and went back to the room directly. They will go to Bodhi Island to investigate the situation tomorrow. In the room facing the street, Nightingale first changed into the sheets and quilts she brought with her, washed up, applied a facial mask by herself, and lay down in the quilt to warm the bed. Su Buling did not rest. He took out the Dayo map from his bag, lit the oil lamp, sat down at the table, and carefully circled it with a brush. The importance of geographical environment in marching and fighting is self-evident. Military maps are forbidden, and the ones that record the accurate deployment of border troops are even more forbidden. It is estimated that they are only kept in the border army's tent. Su Buling knows the deployment of the Ziliang border troops very well, but Yuzhou is located on the eastern front, thousands of miles away. The court cannot show these things to him. There is no way in Yuzhou, and it is impossible to get the details. Su Buling can only guess the approximate deployment of the Eastern Front on the map according to the deployment habits of the Ziliang border troops. As the Prince of Suwang, the advantage is probably here. Almost all the soldiers of Dayu have fought with the great General Su Lai. Su Lai won hundreds of battles and founded the country. His record is impeccable. The younger generation of soldiers naturally learned from him. Following the experience of Su's army, although there have been some changes in the past 60 years, there will not be too many changes. In the dim light, Su Buling drew a 1,000-mile battle line across Luoyang, Taiyuan, Dingzhou, Yunzhou, and Yuzhou on the map. This area is the main battlefield between the north and the south. The court claimed to have deployed 1 million soldiers, but the actual number must not be so much. The main force of the troops of the right Prince of Northern Qi has been focusing on Yunzhou and Yuzhou all year round, which must be an important direction for the court to deploy defense. The result of Su Buling's discussion with Xiao Qi is that the border army may have troubles, and Yuyun and Yuzhou are under the nose of Liaxi Protectorate, so there should be no problem. The terrain of Luoyang Mountain is too bad, and it is not easy for large-scale cavalry to march. The court has enough time to buffer. The only place where trouble might happen is probably the area from Taiyuan to Dingzhou. Once the city is broken, they will march straight in, and there will be no defense until Kaifeng. Su Buling looked at the map carefully for a long time, but he just guessed and couldn't figure out what kind of trouble would happen, so he could only take note for the time being and focus on the nearby Bodhi Island. Judging from the current situation, Li Hanzhong has arrived nearby. Since Leading County is calm, either he has not found him, or he has found him but was not discovered by Chendeizai, otherwise he must have fought a great battle. Since Chendeizai and Ding Yuan have heard the news so well, it is impossible for them to go to the place blindly, and it is estimated that the possibility of not finding him is greater. Last time in Longtan, Su Buling had a fight with Chendeizai and Ding Yuan, and no one could do anything to each other. If Chendeizai and Ding Yuan had been a little more careful, they would definitely find helpers to ensure that everything is safe in order to guard against him and Li Hanzhong. Thinking of this, Su Buling had a slight headache. He and Li Hanzhong were not in the same group, and it was impossible for them to join forces. It was already very difficult to deal with Chendeizai and Ding Yuan. If another Boxing King or Hammer King appeared, he would be beaten to death. Su Buling thought about it and felt that it was better to be prepared. He first went to discuss with Miss Jeju, the Breaking Bad, to see if there was anything more sinister to prevent accidents. The county town was not big, with a vast area and few people. There was no sound on the street as soon as it got dark. Su Buling closed the map and tilted his head to look. Nightingale closed her eyes and concentrated with a green mask on her face. He didn't know whether she was asleep or not. He put away the map, blew out the oil lamp, and came to the corridor of the small inn. Before he reached the door of Zhongli Jeju's room, he heard a slight splash of water in the room, and a tune of hum. The sound of humming was very nice. Taking a shower. Su Buling paused, hesitated a little, but still walked to the door and raised his hand to knock. Dong dong. Miss Jeju. The singing in the room paused, and the splashing sound also stopped, and then the gentle voice of Zhongli Jeju was remembered. What are you doing here at night? I am not that kind of woman. I haven't settled the score with you for kissing me last time. Su Buling narrowed his eyes slightly. I'm coming in. Wait dash. As if afraid that Su Buling would mess around with the excuse of impulsiveness, Zhongli Jeju immediately became honest. The sound of splashing water was heard in the room, which should have come out of the bathtub, but immediately there was another cry of ouch, as if something was stepped on, and there was a sound of porcelain bottles breaking. Su Buling's face changed slightly. Everyone knew what was in Zhongli Jeju's porcelain bottle. If he stepped on some strange poisonous fog, it would be a big deal. He held his breath without hesitation, raised his hand and backed out of the door, ready to go in and see what was going on. As he pushed open the door, Zhongli Jiju behind the screen anxiously exclaimed, "Don't come in." Bang! The reminder was obviously too late. The moment Su Buling pushed open the door, a ball of powder exploded from the door, which was so close to his face that he had no time to dodge and was directly sprinkled all over his body.